Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Unit 2 overview. We will be starting week 6 this week, and I have a few things to go over in this unit. It will probably be a little bit longer. I'm going to combine it with my lecture this week since it is an overview. So I'll do an overview of the speaker and a little bit of a lecture on the rhetorical situation. So I will share my screen here and we can get started with taking a look at week 6 in general. I will go over all of the weeks in my unit overview, but let's just take a look at this week's work. So the first assignment is due Sunday, February 27th, no later than 11:59 p.m. Since we're starting a new unit, you know that will involve actually doing the response to the video. These questions, you will answer these questions just like you did with the first unit, and then what you will do in the third unit. The first assignment is always that response to the video. So let's just take a look at the to-do list for this week. I have an extra credit journal prompt, and I would encourage you to do it because I want you to start thinking about how we as writers, as authors, and as speakers, how we use persuasive strategies to convey a message to our audience. So those of you who do take part in this journal, you just click on the link to the journal. It will take you to an area. You create the journal entry and then post the entry. You click post down in the corner. So as I said, that's an optional assignment. I don't like to add any extra assignments like that are above and beyond requirements. So I offer extra credit points for those of you who choose to do those extra things. Then we have this unit overview, which will be posted probably right under this to-do list once I'm done recording it. And that will include the week 6 lecture. Then you jump down here, you will be watching the video called The Urgency of Intersectionality. And I'll talk a little bit more about the video and about the speaker. And I have some additional resources related to this video that might be of interest to you. Again, you're not required to watch or read that extra stuff, but sometimes it can be very interesting, but can also provide some context for what the speaker is saying in the video. So I post those things as just extra information to help you to understand the context. And then lastly, complete the assignment for the week. So week 6, as you'll see, it won't be available until February 20th. And there's a reason for that, but I'll give you a quick little sneak peek of what I have there. I do have this outline and transcript from the video itself, and I will talk about that a little bit later. There's a video on YouTube by Janelle Monáe related to Say Her Name. And once you watch the video, you're not going to read it unless you feel like just reading the transcript. Once you watch the video, you might be interested in watching this music video. It's kind of long. It's over 10 minutes long, but might just give you, a little different perspective on what the speaker was saying in her video. Then I have a couple of articles related to white fragility, why it's a problem, as well as critical race theory and why it's under attack. And these are all related to things that Kimberlé Crenshaw has been involved in. And then I have a link to the PowerPoint, which I will actually get into now. Okay, so here you see the Unit 2 overview. I'll go through this week by week. We have 5 weeks for this unit, just like we do for every unit in this course. We are right now in week 6 with the video response due on Sunday the 27th. In week 7, you will have the thesis and annotated bibliography due. That's due Sunday, March 6th. Then the following week will be Essay 2 Rough Draft, and that is due Sunday the 13th of March. Week 9 is your discussion post on counter argument and rebuttal. And that is due on March 20th. And then we finish the unit with the essay 2 final revised draft, which is due on Sunday, the 27th. So we have just over a month to complete the work for the next 5 weeks, the next 5 Sundays. Here on this slide, of course, I just have a repeat of the journal prompt regarding what persuasive strategies do authors, speakers, advertisers, and others use to convey a message. And I want you to write about 5 to 8 sentences on that. And again, this is not required, but it is extra credit. So if you do it, you will get 1 extra credit point tagged on at the end of the semester. So what does the word rhetorical mean? We've heard rhetorical batted around. We've heard, maybe rhetorical situation, rhetorical questions. Well, what the heck does it mean? Well, it means the art of speaking or writing effectively, right? So rhetorical is relating to or concerning the art of rhetoric or the art of speaking or writing effectively. Here is a secondary definition. It's expressed in terms intended to persuade or to impress. And of a question, so the rhetorical question is one which is asked in order to produce an effect or to make a statement, rather to elicit information or to get an answer. So a rhetorical question is just kind of making a point, right? Rather than seeking information. So yeah, rhetoric is the art of speaking or writing effectively or writing persuasively. We want to persuade an audience to see our way of thinking. So here is another graphic. And this is the rhetorical situation. I kind of like it because it's a Venn diagram and I'm a bit of a nerd. But we have several overlapping circles that illustrate how a bunch of different things, all of this stuff, comes into play when we are writing or speaking. Of course, we're primarily concerned with the writer or the speaker, the person who is doing the thing, right? Doing the communicating. And the writer or speaker comes from a type of background. They live in a culture. They have a variety of experiences. All of these things that contribute to who they are as a human being also affects how they are as a writer or a speaker, and the types of messages that they want to convey. Likewise, the audience also lives in a culture and has, a certain type of background and certain set of experiences. So audiences come with this kind of, same things, not necessarily the exact same experiences and background as the writer. Sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't. But all of these things come into play and affect the audience as people as well. Then we have the purpose. So we see this here, which is where writer and audience overlap. And that is what the writer is seeking from the audience. What do we want the audience to do? Well, we want the audience to listen, or we want the audience to read, and then we want them to respond, right? So we have a purpose in our writing. Then there's this fancy word called exigence, and over here you see that in the overlap between the subject and the writer. And the exigence you have to think of in terms of why the writer is writing about a subject. So when we write or when we speak, we are motivated by something. There is something in us that we want to get out, right? That we want to express to other people so that we can convey this whole new meaning making and construction of knowledge. So there's the exigence, the motivation of why you were writing in the first place. Of course, we have the subject, the thing that you are writing, and context. So context is actually this big circle that encompasses all these three things. And context involves who is discussing this, where and when, time and place, culture, so on and so forth. All of these things come into play, right? So context is this big circle encompassing all of those things. And then we have genre here in the overlap between subject and audience. So genre is the way in which, or the how, that the subject is presented to an audience. So if you have an audience of kindergartners or an audience of college students, your subject is going to be conveyed differently depending upon the audience. So genre is very much dependent on subject, but it's also dependent on audience, right? So you aren't going to speak to a bunch of video game enthusiasts and suddenly pull out a 40-page scholarly article to support your point. Instead, you're probably going to look to the YouTube gamer who has a million followers and does all these playthroughs, right? So yeah, genre makes a big difference there and is dependent upon both subject and audience. Here's another graphic that is called the rhetorical triangle, and this shows you the interplay between the various rhetorical appeals, which you may or may not be familiar with, and the various aspects of the writing situation. So writers and speakers persuade in three main ways. We have ethos, which is the appeal to credibility, and that more or less corresponds with the writer, who you are as a writer. You want to build trust with your audience. You want to show that you're credible, right? So why are you competent to speak on the issue? And where does your authority come from as a writer? You've done the research, you want to be credible. So think of ethos as being corresponding to the writer. Likewise, we have logos, right? Logos is the appeal to intelligence, the appeal to logic, the appeal to reason. And that is correlating with the context or the subject that you're writing about. So how do I support my claims? What evidence do I have? Have I presented a logical, well-constructed argument? And you'll see down here in the corner, and it's chopped off a little bit, is counter-argument. And counter-argument is very, very important aspect of argumentative writing. It shows your audience that you are credible, right? And it shows that you are logical because you have not only examined the thing that you're arguing, but you've also researched and analyzed the opposition's point of view, right? You have taken that into consideration. So it's not just a one-sided thing. You're like, I haven't just researched this, I've also researched that, and I think there are holes in this argument, and therefore I still stay with my stance, right? So that is the appeal to logic or logos. And lastly, we have pathos, which is the appeal to the emotion. Remember, I said before that we have something that we want from the audience, right? We want to affect the audience, and the best way to do that is often through pathos. What emotion do you want to provoke? This is appealing to the emotion. Do you have shared values that you want to draw on with your audience? Or how does your audience beliefs fit with your message? So audience and pathos are very interconnected there. And I like to use the example in some of my face-to-face classes of the advertisement for one of the animal welfare organizations, and Sarah McLachlan is singing "In the Arms of the Angel." That's the song playing in the background. And you see all these images of the poor animals with their sad eyes, and it pulls at your heartstrings so that you want to give money to this organization to help save the animals, right? So that's a perfect example of pathos, how advertisers and speakers and writers can play to the emotions of the audience to get some kind of an effect, right? To get something from the audience. So moving on, I wanted to provide these notes from week 3 for these 2 videos that I had posted from Crash Course in Arizona State University, Critical Thinking and Arguing, and Evaluating Arguments. And there's some vocabulary that I would like you to become familiar with, because this is vocabulary that's relating to argumentative writing. In evaluating arguments, they make a distinction between deductive arguments and inductive arguments. And she gives the example of the deductive argument where grounds and warrants absolutely, positively guarantee the claims, right? And she says, you think of geometry proofs. And if anybody has taken geometry in high school, you know that you have to go through these proofs that say one thing, and then you have to go through logical steps and grounds and warrants to prove that geometrical proof. And it's always going to guarantee that claim. Conversely, we have the inductive argument, which also uses grounds and warrants to support a claim, but those grounds and warrants don't always guarantee the claim. So what do we mean by claim? And this is from the Critical Thinking and Arguing video. Well, you think of a claim as your thesis or your stance. It's the thing, something that someone is arguing for or against. So in this case, for our argumentative essays, we ask you to have a thesis, and the thesis has the topic, right, the subject that you're writing about, but it also includes your stance and some reasons why you are arguing for or against a particular thing. That is your claim. So think of claim and thesis as being together, right? Then we have grounds. And what is grounds? Grounds is the evidence or the facts or the reasons that support the claim. And then we warrant. The warrant is the connection, and in the video they show a bridge between the claims and the grounds, right? So the warrant is the connection that's between what you're arguing and then all the evidence and facts and reasons that you use. Lastly, we have counterexample, and that's really just your counter argument. It is what the opposition is saying or arguing. So one thing to note is to avoid universal and categorical language. Universal and categorical language includes words like all, none, always, or never. We can find flaws in arguments by identifying categorical language, finding a counter example, and providing a counter argument. And then in the evaluating arguments video, she does this whole section on diagramming arguments, which can help to narrowing the focus to the components of an argument. So if you can go through an argument and find the claims and the grounds and the warrants, if you can identify any kind of categorical language, and if you can find any counter examples or come up with a counter example or a counter argument, that will get you a long way to understanding somebody's argument. So the reason we do this first assignment before you start writing any of your argumentative essays is to actually look at the speaker's argument that they're making, right? You are going to identify what their thesis or what their claim is, right? You are going to identify that there might be some kind of concession statement, that the speaker may be somewhat biased. And then questions 4, 5, and 6 kind of deal with the type of support or the type of grounds. And you want to be able to discern between what is fact and what is opinion. So we ask you to list 3 facts and then ask you to list 3 opinions, which are personal views or judgments that can't be proven. And then it's essential that you not only address counter arguments or counter examples, but do so respectfully. So it can sometimes be hard to go through a spoken argument to find any kind of opposition statements or any concessions. So the counter argument and concession are usually connected in some way, and sometimes it can be stated very vaguely. It's not really out there all that much. But a good speaker will address some counter arguments and then turn from that counter argument with a rebuttal, right? Lastly, you want to address the speaker's tone, but you also want to think about the effectiveness, the overall effectiveness of the speaker. How effective are they at persuading you as an audience? And that's when you can think about the logos, right? The facts and support that they're using. You can think about the ethos, who they are as a speaker, what kind of background they come from, are they trustworthy? And lastly, think about pathos or pathos. How does that speaker get you emotionally involved so that you feel called to do something, to respond, right? So that's the real purpose that we have of this video response. It's not just so that you understand the basics of it, but really to start analyzing, to start thinking critically about what the speaker is saying and how they're saying it and how effective they are in getting their message across. That said, let's dive into a little bit about Kimberlé Crenshaw, speaker of The Urgency of Intersectionality. Keep in mind that this was done in November of 2016, so a lot has happened in the 5.5 years that she did this presentation for TED. 2 years ago, we had the pandemic hit, and then in the summer of 2020, we had the whole fallout of the George Floyd murder. And then, Black Lives Matter suddenly just kind of just grew overnight to mainstream media attention, whereas before it was a movement that really wasn't thought about or talked about in the mainstream media. Now it was really a big thing, and it really came to the awareness of many of us. So a lot has changed between November of 2016 and February of 2022. There's still a lot that's the same, but a lot has changed since she first did this video. So it's good to keep that in mind. And it's something that you can address in your writing if you want to. So Crenshaw is a professor of law at both UCLA out in California and Columbia Law School in New York. So she's bi-coastal. She's also a leading authority in the area of civil rights, Black feminist legal theory, and racism, and the law. She has her Juris Doctor as well as some other credentials behind her name. And her work has been foundational in 2 fields of study that have come to be known by terms that she coined: critical race theory, which is something that's been getting recent media attention over the past year, and intersectionality. And the focus of our work here with this video is primarily intersectionality. I do have some information up that I pointed out before on critical race theory if it's something that's interesting to you and you want to know a little bit more about it and why it's such a big deal recently. So let's talk about intersectionality for a moment. The Oxford English Dictionary, the 2515 version, defines it as the interconnected nature of social categorizations such as race, class, and gender, regarded as creating overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination or disadvantage, a theoretical approach based on such a premise. And Webster's Dictionary defines it as the complex cumulative way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination, such as racism, sexism, classism, combine, overlap, or intersect, especially in the experiences of marginalized individuals or groups. This was a term that Crenshaw coined in 1989, and it refers to an analytical framework that views people through the interaction of their social identities. That can include things like gender, race, sexual orientation, socioeconomic class, ability, so on and so forth, all these various segments of their social identities. And it results in a unique lived social experience of oppression and privilege, as opposed to an additive model of oppression that views people as the sum of their social identities. So you're not just one thing, right? But all of your various social identities kind of combine and intersect and overlap. So there are a couple of graphics from the video that I think are helpful to understand intersectionality a little bit more, and she likens it to an intersection in the street. So here, this intersection, and this is the court case that she discusses in the video, which involved a Black woman. And the argument there was she was a victim of discrimination, but the court thought that she was not a victim of discrimination because they had hired both women and Black people, but never a Black woman. So she was here in the middle of the intersection between sexism and racism. And then another figure here just shows the various ways and all the various social identities that can be in that intersection, right? So we have a whole bunch of isms and phobias that contribute to that intersectionality. And I think that is it. Yes. And then I just got that information primarily from the TED website. So if you have any questions about the material that we're covering this week, about the video or about the assignment or anything that's coming up in the unit, feel free to email me. And if you want to get a head start with your annotated bibliographies, I will be posting some resources that I have culled from previous classes where we've worked together to find resources. So I think that will help you a little bit because I know that it's a lot to do. The annotated bibliography, I will be asking you to provide 5 sources this time instead of 3. I did that for the first time through just so you could become familiar with how to do the research and how to write the annotated bibliography. Now that you have that experience, I'm going to ask you to take a look at more resources for your annotated bibliography. So just keep that in mind. And if you want to work ahead a little bit, that's fine. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me, or if you feel like you're slipping behind or you have some life events that are just kind of taking over, reach out to me, communicate with me, let me know what's going on. I am happy to be flexible and to work on some kind of an arrangement with you. I want you to be successful in this class. So I'll do what I can to help you. All right, everybody, have a wonderful week. Take care. Bye-bye.